We've both recently gone through the induction into motherhood and as a result completely lost ourselves and our identity.
I mean, it's the whole reason I wrote this book is because I hadn't found anyone talking about this.
I would call myself like a survivor of different sort of traumatic experiences throughout my life that I've rose up against. This was by far the hardest.
Am I failing as a mother? Like, I'm good at and I feel like you're the same as me, high achiever, I excel. And so why aren't I excelling at this? And exactly admitting that I can't do this alone.
That's what broke me. The pressure of trying to do it all and be it all, and then realizing that I was absolutely fucking miserable trying to do it all at once.
Every person in my life with a chronic illness, to my knowledge, experienced some form of childhood trauma. And that was when I went down the rabbit hole of the research. The higher your adverse childhood experience score.
Done that, the 1 out of 10?
Yeah, I think I've got 7.
Yeah, I was an 8.
Yeah.
High achievers. So many golden nuggets in this episode. So a bit of an interesting turn of events in how I met the guest that is joining me today on next season. I've just spent a good 4 days in solitude being by myself. Jack took Ariella on a father-daughter trip and I was staying in Melbourne for a couple of nights before coming home. I was walking around one day, wandered into a bookshop. There were many books on the shelf, kind of as I do when I choose books. I just look at the covers and kind of go with like what speaks to me. And I picked up this book, Saying Yes to You. And I got back into the hotel that night and I thought, well, I just had a really nice spa experience and I thought I'm going to order myself a bottle of wine and a cheese platter and I'm going to sit down and I'm going to read this book. And literally 2 pages in, I was just floored at how much I resonated with the woman, Hollie Azzopardi, who has written this. So much so that I included it in a little reel where I was talking to people on my Instagram account about how I was reflecting over the time on my own. And then somehow Hollie found my reel and commented on my reel. And then I had to reach out and say, oh my gosh, like I have a show, I need to have you on it. Where are you located? And then the stars aligned. And here I am today on the Gold Coast.
Yeah.
And here you are.
It's less than a week later, I feel. Like we really turned that around quickly.
So quickly. And I guess, the main theme of what we want to talk about today and why I've got you here is because, for one, I resonate with the fact that you and I have been mask wearers pretty much our whole life.
Oh, yeah.
But we've both recently gone through the induction into motherhood and as a result completely lost ourselves and our identity. And I've been having so many conversations with different people about this and I haven't met someone who quite encapsulates it and describes it the way that you do.
Thank you. It means a lot to me. I mean, it's the whole reason I wrote this book is because I hadn't found anyone talking about this. And so it felt really important, not just for me to reflect on my experiences, but also for the other mums that are coming after me to find someone talking about all of this because we don't tend to.
And as you said, it was the greatest initiation in your life. And that's how I feel about it too. Like I thought, man, I've done a lot of hard stuff. Like I would call myself like a survivor of different sort of traumatic experiences throughout my life that I've rose up against. But this was by far the hardest. And I felt like literally like Alice in Wonderland falling down the tunnel, just like grasping and like trying to like find a sense of like, why do I feel like this? And who am I now? And where is this all going? And will it ever change? Or like, am I stuck just in this free fall forever? Like that's literally how I felt, broken in a sense.
Yeah.
I've obviously read your book. Love it. And I would love for you to start by sort of explaining kind of what happened to you in that first year of motherhood.
I can really relate to what you're saying in that I have faced off with many traumatic experiences in my life. I remember when I was pregnant and I cringe at myself now, but I said, I can do hard things. I've done a Vipassana retreat, 10 days in silence. Like that was my definition of hard before I became a mother. I'm a mum now and I look at that and go, give me that. That's a holiday. And I think for me, the first year I went in very naively, firstly because my husband Trent and I, we weren't around any new parents in our lives. We were the first ones on both sides of the family to have babies. We weren't really like around babies a lot. So we really were going in blind. We had no idea what we were getting ourselves into. So I think part of it was just a naivety and an innocence. But what actually ended up happening in my first year of postpartum was a number of compound traumatic experiences that led themselves to this bubbling over that resulted in PTSD. So for me, I had firstly a really intense and traumatic birth experience. I knew birth was going to go the way it was going to go. I'm not naive enough to think that I am this special righteous person and it's going to be perfect for me and then other women have different experiences. But the toll that it took on my physical body, 40 plus hours active labor, projectile vomiting. She was posterior baby, so the pain was just, it's the most painful labor you can experience. It was very traumatic. Ended up in hospital with my legs in stirrups, episiotomy, forceps, the whole thing. During COVID, by the way, so lockdowns, we couldn't have our private midwife in the hospital with us. We couldn't have our doula with us. We couldn't have visitors in the hospital because of all of the restrictions. Get home and I actually didn't realise I was unable to breastfeed. And so that went undetected. There were just these thing after thing after thing. The floods came. We weren't able to find the specialty formula my little girl needed because it needed to be shipped, and we couldn't get our mail because we were flooded in. So there was one night where I literally could not feed my 4-month-old. She wasn't old enough for solids. I had no milk supply. We couldn't get her formula. And I remember that night being in the shower, it just head in my hands going, this is getting worse. This isn't getting better. How the same what you just said, like, is this just me forever now? I'd lost every semblance of resilience, which I tend to hold as an identity factor. Joy, everything about me was stripped bare. And so off the back of that very compound first 6 months of her life, we had a friend who was also in a coma after a tragic accident. It was just thing after thing. And I lost myself. I ended up, waking up and thinking, oh, here we go, another day like this. And I said to my husband countless times, I hate my life. And I had never said that. I've had hard times in my life, but I've never said I hate my life. And the first year of my daughter's life, I was saying that pretty much every day.
Wow. Yeah. And I think once the words come out of your mouth, it makes it so real and so scary. Like, I think I obviously was thinking that. I don't know if I actually voiced it because, again, like, that's too scary and that's too real. But I think we had a similar journey into motherhood in the isolation factor.
Yeah.
As we were chatting just briefly before. I moved to Sydney, and the day that we got the keys to our home, I found out I was pregnant with Ariella. And so all of my community and friends and network up here on the Gold Coast had been there for, 3 decades. And so I found myself feeling very isolated down there. And I remember, like, for the first 6 months of Ari's life, like, just pretty much doing everything by myself
alone.
Before Jack looked at me in the kitchen one night scrubbing the bottles out for like the 7th time of the day and said, we need help. But again, even that, like that first thing too, like the not feeling bad to ask for help or need help, like particularly if you've got no one there, there's a whole like, I'm so resilient, I've done so many other great things in my life, like I'm strong, what's wrong with me? Like, am I a weak person if I actually wave the white flag and actually need help?
Yeah, it's almost like, am I failing as a mother? Like, I'm good at and I feel like you're the same as me, high achiever, I excel. And so why aren't I excelling at this? And exactly admitting that I can't do this alone. The isolation was one of the biggest things amongst it all. Is like, I have no friends, I have no family around here. I'm in a new home, I'm in a new environment, and yet we still put this pressure on ourselves. But everyone else, all the other mums have it together, so I've just got to get on with it and figure it out.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is too, because we do have that strong achiever part in us, and we are still trying to cling on to those labels and the ego that we had before going into motherhood. I was trying to do it all. Like, I remember working up until 8 or 9 p.m. the night before I was scheduled for surgery the next day. I had a C-section, and being sort of back on client work within 2 weeks of her life. Yeah. And for the first year of her life, I still had clients running through my agency, Yellow Panda, and I would be like sitting at the desk with her and the bouncer, or under the desk in the bouncer, like trying to, get it all done, thinking that it was really important for me to prove, because I thought that people wanted to see that like you could be a new mom and be still working. For me, it was like, now's my chance to actually show that I can do it all. And I think that's what broke me. It was the pressure of trying to do it all and be it all, and then realizing that I was absolutely fucking miserable trying to do it all at once.
And completely depleted. Like, it's, for me, I resonate with that so much. It was like this pace that I was used to functioning at before becoming a mother, and then me trying to keep up that pace while I'm more depleted than I've ever been, more depressed than I've ever been. The health factors, not to mention chronic illness, like let's not even look at that right now. But it is this different pace that if you don't know it, you have to figure it out. And the only way for me, at least, to figure things out is I have to go way too far the wrong way to then backpedal. And I was the same. I was the same.
You're speaking my language. I'm so the same. I mean, for me, I think the biggest thing that showed up for me, like physically and sort of mentally, was anxiety. So like, I would wake up every day just so anxious, and it was a kind of anxiety that would completely riddle my system to the point where like I couldn't think, I couldn't move, but I had to. Yeah. So I'd be very good at just like going from one task to the next, to the next, to the next, and kind of just, like whatever fire needed to be put out at the time I could. But then it took me away from being able to have any focus on doing anything for myself, or creating like the next version of myself, or doing the work I needed to do on myself to heal myself through this process too. So there was this whole period of just feeling absolutely stuck. Yeah. And I think we can go into that in a little bit actually in terms of like, you know, what we do to try and work through this, because that is a huge part of your book. And I know that for anyone who only has, you know, half an hour to an hour to listen to us today, we want to give them not just the relatable sob story, but I guess, you know, like some tips to help like move them out of it and tell them that everything will be okay. Because I do feel now, 2 years in, that the fog has lifted.
Oh, yes.
And I'm like so enjoying like this project, you know, being the podcast and the incredible women, like-minded women that I'm being able to meet. The socialization factor, we're talking about it just a little bit earlier before we went on camera about your book tour at the moment and how it's getting in front of people and you're having conversations and how, like just how fulfilling that is and how long we went without it.
Community and connection. It's like the basics, but we forget. I remember before becoming a mother, you know, you'd hear people talk about the importance of community. You go, I got my friends and family. Yeah, I got community. And now the reestablishing of my connection with that word and what it means to actually have community that's like-minded and going through similar experiences, it's soothing and healing. So it's been a huge part.
I also really loved how you opened the book with the apology to mothers who've gone before us, because I felt like so guilty.
Yeah.
Like particularly for, I would say, you know, my brother's partner who had my niece and nephew before I had Ariella and not understanding the amount of pressure that she was under and, you know, that it wasn't really that she wanted me to come around and, you know, like just visit, but it would be, you know, support her, help her, take the kids, send food. Yeah, like all of the things that she actually needed. I think a lot of friends show up with toys and, you know, like we'll sit down and hang out with the kid for like an hour or so and then like take off again. Like it's, I mean, that apology is...
It felt necessary. And it was one that I sent to my close friends who had children maybe 6 months to a couple of years before me. I remember sending messages out to them after motherhood and being like, I had no idea. I thought I got it. And you just cannot possibly understand until you've been through, because it's an initiation and because neurologically your brain is literally different. Like, to the pre-mother brain. So, of course, you're not going to understand until you've lived the experience too. And so it just felt like the important thing to do, because with my first book, I wrote it pregnant, but I wasn't yet with child. And so it's still a great book, but there are moments in that book where I'm going, oh my gosh, as a mother, the things I was saying are quite triggering to me as a mother now. And so it felt necessary to open this book with that apology, not to discredit anything I'd said previously, but I'm in a different life stage. I'm a different person now. I have different lenses on through my experience of life. Now I know better. I'll do better, not just to show up to myself as a mother, but all the other mothers in my life.
And what would you say is a truth about motherhood or identity that no one prepares you for?
How hard it is. And the hardness won't miss you. It doesn't matter how much work you've done, how many courses you sat through pregnancy, how much pre-work, how much sitting down with other mothers and asking them questions. You can do all of the prep work, but that shift will be difficult for you because there is a version of you that is dying. And I feel like if I were to speak to myself going through that now, I would say to her, it would just be so much easier for you if you just let it feel painful and grieve the versions of you that are wanting to be let go of. Like, release the grip. You are not going to be operating the way that you were previously. That's okay. That actually means you're doing it right. I feel like that's the important piece that people need to know in this kind of a transition. The matrescence experience is parts of you are dying and they're dying to yourself, and it's going to feel like grief. Let it.
We're going to come back to matrescence.
Yeah.
But I want to touch on the grief aspect, because I think that is like maybe one of the number one things that women who are becoming mothers need to be prepared for.
Yes.
And it is the dying of the old self.
Yes.
But before we can actually like grieve that properly and like package it up and move on from that, we deal with a lot of childhood trauma, etc., that wants to be addressed and, you know, put to bed once and for all. So all of the things that we've confidently buried and kept ourselves busy from and run away from until we become mothers comes back to bite us big time. And I think it is because like we spend so much time in solitude. So we think about like all of the hours we spend breastfeeding, and then we're not sleeping, and then we're alone a lot. So for the first time in my whole entire life, I just felt so like consumed by like my own thoughts, but particularly going back and looking at the past and trying to make sense of it and peace of it. And then it wasn't even just like grieving my old life, because I had just, you know, had to step away from being like the business owner, which, you know, I was so proud of. Stepping away from my hometown, my friends, my family, moving interstate, being in a fairly new relationship as well. And then like even the eve before Ariella's first birthday, my dog passed away, who was like my first baby, my first child for 9 years before she came along. And, you know, throughout this 2-year period, I also had a couple of other failed pregnancies. So last year I spent 5 months of the year pregnant between the two. The first one was only 6 weeks and I lost it. The second one I carried up to 17 weeks and had to have a surgical termination because it wasn't healthy to continue. And that was only 2 weeks before our wedding, and it was only 2 days before we had to pack our bags and fly to Daydream Island to run a retreat with all of the members in the entourage from my husband Jack's business. And the day that we were flying out, I did a back injury as well. I went to bend over and pick up a bag. Like my back had been niggly and I just thought it was from the pregnancy, which normally it is because of all the ligaments that relax and that kind of thing. But I actually ended up with 2 bulging discs, a tear and a pinched nerve in my L3. And I had the most painful sciatica in my leg, not only for that, you know, through that surgery, through the recovery, through this retreat, through the wedding, coming back home, moving house again, which we've done 3 times in 2 years. So very, you know, this is why I'm saying I relate so much. Like
thing.
And I don't think we can even like try and clear the deck for 2 years to just be able to focus on becoming mothers and just focus on getting through postpartum, because life happens.
Exactly. It's not going to go on pause for you. Like, oh, we better not send her any hard stuff because she's in matrescence. She's in postpartum. It doesn't go that way.
Yeah.
I feel like to a degree I thought it would go that way, that life would be easy around me while I navigated all this other stuff. It doesn't work. Life continues to life. Yeah.
Exactly. And so you go through some of the hardest and darkest times so alone and so isolated and so half full, maybe quarter full, maybe a couple of teaspoons full.
Definitely.
And so there's a massive healing journey in that. So as I said before, I wanted to go back to matrescence because I did mention that Dr. Christy Goodwin, who was on an earlier episode of the show, actually told me about this concept for the first time ever. And I was like, whoa, like, why do we not know about this? So again, let's remind anyone who didn't see that episode, like, what is it?
Matrescence is the rite of passage of motherhood. It's when you become a mother for the first time. It's when the maiden in you dies and you step into mother. So it's that voidy space between. The way that I see it is you're passing the baton like you're in a relay race, and the maiden version of you is passing the baton over to the mother that you're becoming. I didn't know about this term either until I had become a mother. And a lot of women had reached out to me because I was sharing a lot of my challenges on social media. And so many women were blowing up my DMs saying, this is matrescence, this is matrescence. And so then I went online and was like, oh my gosh, there's a word to describe this rite of passage. I feel like there could be a few reasons why we don't know about this. Firstly, it's a relatively newer term, and so people are still actually understanding that there is a term to describe this transition. Secondly, we may have heard about it in maidenhood and dismissed it because it's not relevant to us, you know, so it's in one ear out the other. So maybe people had mentioned it and it just wasn't something that I retained because it wasn't relevant to me at the time. And thirdly, there is still that little bit of I don't know if it's got like a hushed undertone to it or people are dismissive of it because it isn't just a mainstream collective spoken about term. I wouldn't say it's taboo more than it's on the outskirts of what's spoken about regularly and often when it comes to pregnancy. Like your doctor's not going to sit you down when you're having your blood test to be pregnant and talk to you about matrescence. It's just not in the vernacular. So I think that there is that part of it where it's still on the outskirts as well, which is why I really wanted to share it in the book to say there is a term for this. There is a word for this. This is a rite of passage. And I mean, let's be real. All rites of passage, the majority that we go through, men and women, in modern day society, they're not celebrated, they're not given any kind of devotion to. And so this is another one of those that's been wrapped up in adolescence as well, and all of the different transitions we go to, menopause, all of them, they're not given the reverence that they deserve. And I feel if we were to really focus on giving matrescence and women navigating matrescence that respect and reverence for that as a rite of passage, we would have a lot more women feeling acknowledged and seen and less isolated like you and I were.
Yeah, definitely. And I really wish I'd found your book 2 years ago.
Right.
Because I feel like I've had to go on my own journey of trying to figure that out for myself. And what that looked like for me was once I did realise like I was not okay, like in a mental health, space, was going and seeing my first therapist who pretty much sat down with me and said, well, most people go through one major life change at once. Like you're navigating 3 or 4 at once. Like it's a lot. And we're going to have to go back and we're going to have to revisit your childhood and we're going to work out what are the schemas that are playing up and then we're going to have to figure out how to like address. And it just felt, I remember walking out, I did a couple of sessions with her, but I walked out of those sessions feeling so heavy.
Heavy.
Like it was like revisiting everything. It was putting in my face like how traumatic it all was and how much work there was to be done.
Which then re-traumatizes you.
I was like, but I just didn't know how to move out of it. And I just wanted the feeling to go away. And so like, I've worked with a couple of different therapists. I've worked with different coaches. I went and studied Vedic meditation.
Yeah.
I've been doing journaling. There's been twice too where I've resorted to medication thinking like, fuck this. I just want to like not feel and not have emotions and just be able to like focus, you know, like getting myself through this. But I found it just so overwhelming sometimes to do that. But medication didn't agree with me either. Like, you know, you'd start like the first couple of days. And I know it works for some women. Like I've got friends who it's been really, really helpful.
Absolutely.
But for me, it just made everything like a million times worse to start with. So I think only I've done sort of 2 or 3 days into kind of antidepressant medication or anxiety medication. And I've just had to like come back to myself and figure out another way through. Going through all of that and trying to figure out how to like find a way out of it quicker. There wasn't a quicker way. Like I've just had to be patient.
Yeah.
And it literally feels since Ari turned 2, like the fog has just lifted. It's the weirdest thing. It's like all of a sudden I don't feel anxious.
Yes.
All of a sudden I'm really enjoying like this project and this podcast and like getting out there again. And all of a sudden I'm noticing people reaching out to me more on social media, because I do even notice like during that period, and you talk a bit about that in your book about if you're trying to figure out like where your identity lies, like go back and look at your bio and your Instagram, or even think about how many times you've changed it to try and like represent where you are today. But there was a time where I just felt like invisible and I felt like I completely dropped off the planet. And for someone who's always needed, I'm happy to admit this, like needed a bit of external validation and for people to like reach out to me and to feel like I'm, you know, motivating and inspiring other people. I couldn't even motivate or inspire myself during that period. So no wonder everyone dropped off. Yeah. But I'm in a place now where I feel like it's all coming back.
And it will keep
it's just a time
coming
thing.
back. It is. And you hear it. And I especially remember in the first year, people were like, it gets better, it gets better. I'm like, what were they saying? They were saying, oh, it goes so quick. And I'm like, this is the slowest year of my life. If one more person tells me how quick it goes, I'm going to scream. This is so slow for me. And honestly, the 2-year marker had the same thing. My little girl's 3.5 now. And it's just every month is like, you get more of yourself back. And it's a new version of you, but you feel more you than you ever have before. You get more space. You have more freedom. You have more creative projects. It just continues. And I really want to touch on what you said around feeling invisible the first 2 years, because I felt the exact same. I think we can wrong ourselves for needing validation or recognition. I think and we could talk astrology another time, but Leo, and like need it. It's part of me. And when I don't have that, I don't feel myself. I feel completely just an empty shell. And I do think for majority of new mums, I'm going to be so bold to say, they feel invisible at some point. Maybe it's not the 1 to 2 years that you and I felt, but I had the same. My invitations to events stopped coming in. My opportunities for work stopped coming in. It was like Hollie's new mum, we've forgotten her. And I don't think it's anyone being conscious about that, but something definitely happens in that first couple of years where, to a degree, the new mother is forgotten. I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying that from...
Far out, we forget ourselves. Like, of course, 100%. Everyone else is going to forget. It's kind of like, you know, it's in terms of like, you know, you get back what you put out. Like in terms of the energy
internal
that we're putting
reflecting
out.
External.
We're not putting out the vibe or the energy that we're okay. So like that's a repellent in most cases.
100. Well, case in point. That's exactly it.
Yeah. Another thing I really loved in the book was the reference to the poem that you wrote at 13 years old, and about how it was about feeling like you're pretending to be okay and essentially like wearing a mask. And that, you know, again, just hit me like so hard, because I found tidying up when we were moving recently a rationale that I wrote for a piece of artwork that I put together when I was 16. And the whole piece was about the mask, and the rationale talked about how like on the outside I pretend everything's okay, but on the inside I'm not. Like I'm deeply unhappy, but I wear this mask and I wear this smile, and no one really knows what it's like to be me.
Yeah. That's literally word for word basically the poem, right? That's crazy. Crazy. Yeah. We learn to wear masks from, I'm going to say, the other women in our lives, mothers, grandmothers, caregivers, because that is what they have known to do to get by. It's an ancestral piece. And it's really interesting, when the book came out, I had a text message come through from an auntie of mine in her 70s. And she had bought the book. She was excited. She's like, oh, I saw it at the bookshop, so I bought it. And then I had another message come through saying, Hollie, I've never felt more seen in the mask that I wore in New Motherhood. And she's in her 70s. She's like, I've worn these masks my entire life. I think it's because we don't know how to be any other way, because we haven't had anyone model to us that it's okay to assert yourself in your boundaries. It's okay to disappoint people. It's okay to literally say yes to yourself, which will likely at some point come at a cost to other people's feelings, especially as women. It's okay to take up the space that's necessary for you, even if people are going to be judging you for that. Like, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. And there's almost this whole reparenting aspect that needs to come into taking the masks off if we haven't seen it modeled to us in a way that's constructive. I feel like a lot of the time the masks are there as safety. They're there to protect. And so the first step is actually for us to feel safe to put the mask down. And we're not going to feel safe in fresh postpartum. We're not going to feel safe if we're navigating all of this complex trauma. But if we can start to just have daily practices or habits that allow our nervous system to expand its capacity to feel safe, then the mask's going to start to come down as a byproduct of that.
Yeah. And I think like feeling safe is like the key word there, because like I didn't feel safe. Like I felt like, you know, the state that I was in was like literally fight or flight or survival mode for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
With that feeling like it's coming to an end, I feel like I'm finally strong enough and brave enough to do this key piece of personal development work, which is to stop people pleasing. And I think for me, what has built up inside me to the point where I feel like it's going to rupture out if I don't just start doing it is that by spending a whole life trying to do what everyone else wants of you, thinking that is what makes you happy, I'm starting to feel like I've filled up with so much shit inside of me of doing that anytime I do that, I'm betraying myself. I'm more miserable not just speaking up and speaking my truth and being true with myself. Yeah. I have to live with myself every day. I'm the one who's waking up with anxiety and spending a whole day inside my body feeling like I wanted to burst.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's like, you have to put yourself first.
There's no other way. And as a mother, especially, like you have to. And that's the title of my first book is Put Yourself First.
Wow.
And then the second book is Saying Yes to You. So you get it. But it's the resentment is what you're feeling.
Yeah.
This is what people pleasers feel.
Yeah.
It's this resentment, but it's our own doing.
It is. And I feel like I've been so dishonest.
Yes.
First of all, I've been so dishonest to myself because I haven't been living to my truth.
Yes.
And then second of all, I feel like I've been dishonest to all the people around me, like particularly partner, you know, my husband, Jack, because I've been acting out and being so, you know, depresso for so long and so anxious. But it was all because of my internal world and all of the conflict that was going on in there.
Absolutely.
And me not wanting to address that and not wanting to look at that and work with that. So trying to blame other things that were going on externally, and then the projection happens, and then, you know, that puts strain on relationships and all that sort of thing. So like it's the accumulation of going through this 2-year period, feeling all of that stuff, witnessing it, having the awareness, and finally going, enough is enough.
I'm responsible for this.
I'm responsible for this. And I'm responsible for sharing my truth, and I'm responsible for just being my own person.
And the root of it is people pleasing.
Yeah, you can't be your own person if you're still trying to please others.
You don't even know who you are because you don't know who you are. When I speak to people pleasers or people who are recovering people pleasers, one of the big questions is, okay, so what do you want? They can't answer. They know what everyone else wants for them to want. But what do you want? Like without anyone else's judgment, without any other, whoever it will impact, just what do you want out of your life, in your days, in your, like what is it you want? And it's so difficult to even answer that question without getting emotional or getting frustrated or not knowing because a people pleaser isn't thinking that. It's what's going to make everyone else okay.
Well, a people pleaser may not have even given themselves permission to even go there.
To want.
They might not even have the thought.
Yeah.
You ask them, they're like, I've never actually thought about that. I'm so disconnected from myself.
Exactly.
And, you know, I was there. I remember the first time I had that epiphany, I was about 35 when I realized I was completely disconnected from myself because I was living life on autopilot, showing up for everyone else. So for me, you know, like I've essentially been on this journey for 5 years and it takes time.
Oh, yeah.
But I think the motherhood initiation has put so much extra pressure on it to actually nip it in the bud and get it fixed.
It puts
and it's hard to think.
Oh, yeah.
Otherwise, you know, you could go your whole entire life stuck in this mode. But for me, and I remember one of the intake forms I filled out for one of the coaches I was working at the time, you know, why do you want to do this work? And it was like, because I understand the link between unresolved trauma, storing it in my body, and chronic illness. And I do not want to end up sick because I feel like that's where it's leading.
Yeah.
I lived in a household full of chronically sick people.
Yeah.
The chronic sickness and then essentially, you know, the drug addiction took my mother's life.
Wow.
So for me, I'm like, I really don't want to repeat those patterns, and I know what's headed if I don't do something now.
It's so powerful what you just shared because you're sharing that as if, I know this, but most people don't know this. And this was a realization I had while writing the book. I didn't know this either, but I kept getting these chronic illness diagnoses. And my sister as well. My sister is a type 1 diabetic diagnosed in late adulthood or later adulthood. And I have hypothyroidism and psoriasis and chronic fatigue on and off my entire life. And when I was writing this book about, people pleasing and my childhood trauma, blinkers started to go off. I'm like, hang on. Every person in my life with a chronic illness has, to my knowledge, experienced some form of childhood trauma. And that was when I went down the rabbit hole of the research. There's a plethora of it online that supports the link between the higher your adverse childhood experience score, which is neglect and abuse in the household, drug addiction,
Have you done
those
that,
things.
the 1 out of 10?
Yeah, I think I've got 7.
Yeah, I was an 8.
Yeah.
High
Same
achievers.
So did that and went, oh, it's this plus this equals this. And so that was when I started to uncover, the root of chronic illness and all of the physical manifestations in my body coming up and out is my childhood trauma. But the childhood trauma is what taught me to people please, because I didn't feel safe when I wasn't wearing a mask, because I had to adapt to my childhood experiences. And so I speak about this very just frankly in the book. When I had my little girl, and I think mothers having girls is a whole other layer, because you see your little girl.
It's the mirror.
She's right there.
tiny
It's
mirror.
like, look at this, look at this.
Especially if they look like you when you're a child.
Yeah, it's insane. Or say the things that you said, You have nowhere else to go but to go, okay, I can repeat this pattern for her, or I can make some really hard decisions that are, saying yes to me, but are going to be really hurtful. And some of them were, family estrangement for me. I had never, ever in my wildest dreams thought that I would end the relationship I have ended since becoming a mother, because the pain of the way that I would need to show up in that relationship, I couldn't continue to carry for my own health and for the behaviours I want to mirror to my little girl.
Yeah, exactly where I arrived with all that sort of stuff too. And I've had estrangement in my family for some time too. And it was for that reason, to protect my health and my sanity, essentially. Yeah. I was just thinking we should probably jump into some of the things that we can do to help women who may be in the thick of it right now. Yeah. And to start with, nervous system regulation, because I also loved your take on this, because it's like so freaking refreshing. Because I'm like, I've got to regulate my nervous system, which means I'm going to be sitting around doing like yoga and breathing and meditating and just trying to be like super grounded and calm all the time. And I'm like, I've never been that person.
That is not what nervous system regulation is. Nervous system regulation is your capacity to move with the ebbs and flows of life. It's your capacity to hold when the big things happen, capacity to relax and rest when there's not as much going on. So our nervous system regulation is not about being chill and calm all the time. That is not the goal. The goal is, it's almost like the resilience. It's the capacity for us to hold. When I was doing all of the research for this book, I had no idea, because all I've heard about until writing this book was, okay, so ice baths are good for the nervous system and journaling. And is that it? Like, am I meant to go and do an ice bath or sit in a sauna? Because that actually doesn't make me feel good right now. And luckily I started to talk to and query lots of different experts in nervous system regulation, where it's like, no, you can actually start at the base level. The base level is the breath, absolutely. Morning sunlight, getting sun on your face first thing in the morning, and protein, eating protein, which is crazy because former pescatarian of 17 years, but for me at least, the health challenges I was having started to shift drastically when I was actually conscious of my protein intake. And that can be any protein. It doesn't have to be animal protein. 30 grams of protein, breakfast, lunch and dinner. Regulates your nervous system. Why are we not talking about this?
That was the one thing that showed up in my blood when I did some blood work to see what was going on, was the protein was too low. There was not enough protein. I knew I wasn't eating enough protein. Yeah. But I didn't know that was going to help.
Right? That actually, because our body goes into, and it makes sense when you're talking about it, our body goes into a fight and flight response when it doesn't have enough protein, because it thinks it's in some sort of starvation mode. And then the cortisol goes through the roof and you're in a stress response. You can stabilize your nervous system literally by having a balanced meal, breakfast, lunch and dinner, and then your snacks in between. Like I was not even a snacker before writing this book, and now I'm like, okay, where's my carb coming from? Where's my protein? Like it's not going out and doing your macros, or you can do that if you want to. I don't do that.
It's just another thing though.
It's just another thing. You don't need to do that. It's literally just eat well-rounded meals with high-quality protein sources. Get morning sunlight on your face in the morning, not with a window in the way. Like get outside and start to breathe deeply. That is where you can start to see the biggest changes. And the other one is actually hydration, water quality and the electrolytes you're adding. So it could be Celtic salt or it could be added electrolytes. The water quality you're drinking is also going to have a profound impact on your nervous system. So really, it's going back to basics.
That's the basics.
It's
I think
the basics.
only thing I would add into that too is like getting help so that you can have some little pockets of time to just be yourself.
Yes.
Without this appendage.
Oh, no, you cannot have the appendage constantly. It's not ideal. But it's very important also, absolutely, the time for yourself, because then when you have that space for yourself, that's where you can start to question, what do I want to be doing with this space?
Yeah. And that's exactly what happened to me in the 4 days that I just had on my own is I had so much time to like process and reflect and get like really angry and really done with the people pleasing.
Yes.
To the point where like I feel like I had a breakthrough, that time of solitude where I wasn't really doing anything at all. Yeah. I just needed to think and feel and make a pact with myself.
Being your own energy.
And I couldn't have done that because if I was still just like being distracted by all of the caretaking responsibilities and just life in general, I wouldn't have had time to do that work.
Well, it just gets hidden. It just disappears beneath all of the to-dos.
Yeah. Which I understand is a luxury. Not everyone has the luxury of being able to have solo time as a mum, but it's certainly something to strive towards. And I think given, the people in my orbit are very ambitious women, we will figure out a way to find that person, to afford that person, whatever it might be. That needs to be a priority.
It has to be.
For sure.
100%. I am in full agreement.
You do talk about it not being a one-size-fits-all approach.
No.
It's like everyone has a unique sort of prescription to deal with this in terms of the different things that they can do. We discussed some of the basics. I've chimed in and talked a little bit about, the solo time and the nanny support or the childcare support. Is there anything else, like anything like specific to you that someone might not have heard of that they might want to try?
This is my favorite. Yes. Okay. So there are so many things in the book. You can read them all in there. And there are lots that we've heard about. But the thing that I loved the most was neuroaesthetics, which is the science of beauty and how beauty is a healer. And so we're talking like art in the home, fresh flowers in the home, starting to have a look at your day and how your senses are activated. So what are the clothes you're wearing, the colours that you're drawn to? What is the scent you have, like your signature scent for your home? Like, are you lighting sage and moving that through the home, or are you diffusing an essential oil? Like, what is that? It's bringing the senses into your space and your environment is healing to the nervous system. So, and there's science there that's evidence, because beauty for me is such a healer. I love, beautiful things and aesthetics and just being in beautiful spaces. But there is science that validates that as something that's beautiful to the eye lowers cortisol in your system. And so having a look around in your home, and this is where I then talk about Marie Kondo and the art of cleaning up and actually decluttering your space. The two go hand in hand.
Yeah.
So having a beautiful space and how do you bring beauty into your home, devotional ritual, these sorts of things. And then also alongside that, how are you holding on to things that need to be let go of? They are huge regulators for the nervous system that aren't getting as much buzz time or air time, but are just as important in impact.
It's incredible to listen to that and think that without even knowing, those were my go-to things as well, like constantly like cleaning out cupboards, and every day I reset the home before I leave, and it's reset before Jack gets home from work. Like I just love having a clean space. I love having beautiful things around, and I also love looking my best because, like having, being able to buy new outfits and have colours and do my hair and makeup before I leave the home puts me in like such a better headspace
100%.
Because I feel put together.
Yes.
So it's like I put myself together and I put my home together, and it creates that sense of calm because you're like, well, probably for control freaks, we're like, everything's under control.
Everything's
under control.
Everything's
the house
clean.
is under control.
But your nervous system is literally thanking you for that too. That's why I had to find the science, because I'm like, there has to be method to this. There has to be reason. But there is. So they're just beautiful little, just buy yourself the fresh bunch of flowers because it's healing your nervous system, you know?
Far out. There are so many golden nuggets in this episode that, I wish Amanda could have heard 2 years ago, but, we're doing it for you now, audience. So, hopefully we can definitely have positive impact on this season if you're about to approach it or you're in the thick of it right now. In saying that, I've got my 3 questions before we wrap.
Okay.
The first one is, and you just finish this one off for me, this season of my life feels like?
Bubbly champagne Very shiny and fizzy and light and bright and enjoyable.
One thing I've stopped apologising for is
taking up space.
And I want women listening to know that.
They are worthy of their own love and their own time.
Incredible. We could have discussed so much more today, but for anyone wanting to know more, it's all in the book. Where can they get your book?
You can grab my book at any of your favourite independent booksellers, Big W, Topia.com, and if you're overseas, Amazon is the best place to grab it.
Awesome. And where can people connect with you? Where do you hang out the most?
Hang with me over on Instagram, and I've also got a Substack that I'm sharing a lot more of my life over on as well.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. We'll make sure we show those links in the show notes. Thank you for being here.